Welcome to The Stumbling Spirit, contemplations on the path of resilience. Whether you realize it or not, you are resilient. It's your birthright. As you take in your next breath, know this truth. It's not only about your capacity to overcome difficult situations, but it's about your courage to do the necessary work to heal, learn, grow, and move forward. What you gain is invaluable wisdom. And it's through these hard stumbles in life that we often discover a new purpose that aligns with our spirit. My name is Fabio da Silva Fernandez, Reiki Master, Mindfulness Coach, and Mystical Explorer. Join me weekly as the Stumbling Spirit podcast highlights the lives of extraordinary people like you, sharing transformative stories and beneficial practices of resilience to guide you on your wellness journey. Imagine running through the scorching heat of Death Valley. Darren Weldrick did it, and for 35 years he's gone the distance as a competitive runner, often finishing within the top 10 in local Canadian races. He's a respected coach with 2 decades of experience training athletes at all levels reach their running goals. In recent years, Darren shifted his focus from road races to ultra relays. His passion project is called Run to Montreal, commemorating the life of his dear friend. Here to discuss this and more is Darren Weldrick. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Fabio, for having me.
What was it like running Death Valley?
So I've done 2 different types of projects in Death Valley. I'm about to do my 4th speed project from a race from LA to Vegas. So, and with that, it's very similar to Run to Montreal. It's hot, but you're on the roads. There's not much trail, a little bit of off-road stuff. And then the other project that I've done is an actual expedition where we sort of lived and breathed for a week through Death Valley, like an actual expedition. So you never left Death Valley for 7 days. So both were very different, but hot, as you can imagine.
So how hot was it, and how did you manage that?
The hottest that I've experienced in there was into the 40s, 45 degrees, and that was on the expedition. But that's right in the interior of Death Valley. So whether it be in the salt flats or literally in the middle of a place called Furnace Creek or a place called Devil's Golf Course, these are fully exposed. There isn't any shade, and it's designed to sort of kill you. That's what the salt does. It sucks the moisture from your body. So that was hot, but you also move at a moderate pace. It's not like the speed project where you're, racing or pushing pretty hard. You're pushing, but in a different way. You sort of go in knowing what you're getting yourself into and just preparing for it that way.
Just to orient our listeners, the speed project is a run from LA to Las Vegas, and it is a relay. And there are teams that register, and part of the course goes through Death Valley. And so that's what we're talking about right now. So speaking of which, you are blazing fast. 16-minute 5Ks, 1 hour, 17-minute half marathons. What has been your most challenging race?
Just for reference, I think if we're looking at PBs, I've done many sub 16 and sub 113 halves. But in terms of most challenging race, I would say that probably the first speed project I did tied with the second Run to Montreal I did were the 2 most challenging ultra races, ultra relays. And then being able to, I was quite fit in those days, being able to sort of run at sub 330 per kilometer pace after running 16, 17 kilometers. And people say it's a relay. It is, but you're stuck in an RV. You're not sleeping. You do your best to hydrate and nourish yourself, but it's a little bit different than, sleeping well and preparing for your best 5K or your best half marathon.
Right. So this ultra relay is relatively new to you in the sense that, you've done other road races in the past, you've done trail runs and stuff. But in general, you've done this for 3 decades, more than 3 decades. So what keeps you motivated to continue running?
So at the time when I started doing ultra relays, they were at that time in 2017. It was newer to me for sure, but that's why I wanted to do it. I needed a different challenge because I'd been running for so long, as you said. I've done every type of race from cross country. I grew up on the track and all that sort of stuff. So I wanted a different challenge, and because, as you said, as a running coach, I live, eat, breathe, talk about, train running all day long. So it's hard for myself to stay motivated. And, part of keeping my athletes motivated is, in fact, being motivated myself. So I needed to look for different types of things to do. And at the right time in my life, for a few different circumstances, I'd sort of heard about some friends who had been invited to try this speed project, some people I'd coached in the past, but it wasn't open to the public or anything like that. And it wasn't when I did it either. So I sort of reached out, got some info on it, and I'm like, you know what? It's rare that I'm inspired by so many other things, like by something that other people have done. It was really a really exciting thing to sort of hear about. So I reached out to the race directors, got myself an invitation, and put together a team. And I was very excited because it was the exact type of racing that I do well with. It suits me very well. I love running high mileage. I like running fast. I've done ultras before, but long runs are not my favorite. I'd rather do 2 10-milers in a day, 16K runs than one 32K run, for example. It's just how I'm built. So it suits me very well. And I got very excited about it. And after I did it the first time, I was like, this is the format that I'm going to use for a project that I'd had in mind.
Absolutely. And I really want to get into that. So that run was in part inspired by someone that is very close to you, or was very close to you, that passed away, called Colin. Could you tell us a little bit about who Colin was to you?
So Colin was a larger than life kind of friend of mine. Started off as an athlete, just very whimsical kind of guy, had his own business, always very entrepreneurial, and a big presence in his friends' lives as well. He sort of fancied himself a James Bond. He was a decent runner, was never going to be an Olympian, but loved the sport. When he was a child, he worked, or much younger person. He worked at the Runner Shop, the second oldest running store in North America. And so when I met him, and I heard he was, looking for a coach, someone that would be mobile enough to go to races with him, we just hit it off. Our love of travel together, and both being entrepreneurs and sort of big ideas people. So we became fast friends. A close friendship and a coaching athlete relationship are very similar in some ways. They're very intimate, and I don't mean intimate in any sort of sexual way, but I mean intimate in terms of how you get to know someone and spend time with them and all of that sort of stuff. That's just the kind of friendship that Colin and I developed. So I'd sort of said to him one night over many martinis that I was gonna, I want to do something different. I was looking for the next challenge. Coaching was great and all that sort of stuff, but I wanted something different, and not different just for difference sake. I want to preface by saying that I believe you need to do something a lot and do it well before you can think about getting sick of it, if it's something that you love. So I decided I was going to do some sort of a run from Toronto, where I live, to Montreal, which is my home and where I'm from. And he sort of laughed in a knowing way, thinking, well, if somebody's going to do this, you will. And we sort of tossed some ideas around, but that was about it. But we knew that at the time he had cancer. We found out it was terminal, he had brain cancer. So I sort of spent most of the next year of his healthy, I guess a healthier life, traveling with him and doing adventures whenever I could, just while he was healthy enough to do it. So my focus on Run to Montreal sort of was put to the side.
What was the impact of his passing on you?
Loss. You never realize until somebody's gone or something's gone, just how much how much space it takes in your life. And in this case, it was very good space. Very close friend, someone I admired, someone that was, is a few years older than I am. And he just didn't care what people thought of him. I'm like that. But it was nice to see someone else who had sort of done similar type things, in terms of his business and adventures and things like that. And he was always the guy in his circle of friends that came up with the big ideas. Or if somebody else did, he was the one that would back them up. It was tremendous loss and a bit of emptiness. It was also, it was one of the first times, at the time I was in my 40s, one of the first times I'd had a close friend sort of pass away. You sort of think about your own mortality at that point. So, and I was in a job that was outside of coaching I'd realized was going to be a dead end job. And so I needed to make some changes. And I was like, well, this is it. There's no time like the present. I'm going to get myself into this race, this speed project race, whatever that means. I'm going to do it. And we'll call it research and inspiration, if nothing more. Went out, did it, met the guys who started it, told them why I was there. And, they loved the fact that I was honest and upfront. They said they would do whatever they could to back me up. And I said, listen, the format that you have is what I want to do. I want to just bring it over to our neck of the woods. And so we did. And that was all because, well, in large part because of some inspiration and kind words from Colin.
One of the things I'm reflecting on right now is, you were doing something for so many years for your own wellness, to, for your physical health, your mental health, and then something like this happens. What shifts for you internally? What else are you doing outside of the running to help with your healing process?
Well, I think, keeping yourself busy, having a focus that is inevitably going to do good for others. We raised a lot of money in that first year, and now I encourage other teams to do their own own fundraising. Running for me was more than just about competition. As you say, it was about my own lifestyle. It's just who I identify with, and it allows me to sort of move through emotions, be them good, bad, or otherwise. So that's sort of, I use running, and I used it in this case to be creative, come up with something that I thought at the time would also help maybe bring the Toronto running community together. Because at that time, I would say that there were, I've got one of the longest private running clubs around in Ontario, but before that, I co-owned another one. So, we're talking early 2000, like none of the clubs and crews, like running crew the term running crew didn't exist at that time. So I think, as those different run clubs and different teams grew and sort of emerged, one thing was clear: it was very disjointed. There wasn't a lot of togetherness, and I was guilty of that. And I thought, well, here's an opportunity for me. I'm not going to say I was the only one doing things to try to bring the running community together, but it was definitely something that I wanted to do. And so I held a big, what I called launch party for Run to Montreal. And that sort of made me feel good to bring, we brought several hundred people together from the Toronto running community on a Wednesday night to a rock and roll bar in Toronto called the Hideout. And just got some live music going and got a bunch of people talking about running, and people who hadn't seen each other in a long time, and people maybe who didn't think they'd socialize or hadn't in years into the same room. And it was great. Next thing you know, all this time passes by and you've done something really cool. Now, when I think back on Colin's passing, it's not with sadness, but certainly with, I'm happy to have known him and to have drawn inspiration from that friendship to do something like this.
Yeah, I recall in one of your posts, you wrote something to the effect that you wanted to do something with every last breath to honor this lively human being. It sounds like the Run to Montreal represents that for you.
It definitely does. Yeah, it definitely does. It's just something that's come together, something that I was able to create with the help of others. It's just awesome to see it still thriving, and many other groups have sort of made it something of their own as well, which is really cool to see.
The Run to Montreal is a roughly 650 kilometer, over 400-mile run relay from Toronto to Montreal. It's a fundraiser. You're raising money every year for these charities, and there are a number of teams that get entered into Run to Montreal, and there are different teams that compete against each other. And this is over how many days?
So, for the initial scope was between 50 and 60 hours, and now we've broken 50 hours. So that's sort of how long it takes. So, and it's nonstop.
How much money have you raised for charities?
That I couldn't tell you. I mean, in the first year or two, I definitely had those numbers. I'm not a fundraiser. That's not my motivation. I wanted to do something good for a couple of the charities and organizations that were near to Colin, and the place where he passed, Kensington Health. And then I had some help from other different organizations, so I wanted to make sure that they were taken care of. But what it's become now is a much, I think, a more effective way of people doing good for others. So if you enter a team, Fabio, I encourage you to take up your own, whatever is near and dear for you if you want to raise money. If somebody else wants to join and they're really not interested in raising money, but they just want to do something really awesome and inspire their kids or their friends or whatever, that's sort of the effect that we're trying to have.
It sounds like you're doing good for yourself, you're doing good for others, but also you're creating community in what it sounds like a time where there is a separation between local running groups. Does that sound about right?
I would say so. The community aspect is a big part of it for me. I've received a lot of good from running, and it's kind of a cool way to give back. And I can't tell you how many teams I've seen do this event or other events like this, but do this event in particular, and the friendships and families that they sort of created, and the closeness is like, these are relationships that will last forever in many cases. So it's really cool. I tell everyone who does this for the first time, it'll change their life. Whether it makes you a stronger runner or a better person or a better teammate, or it really puts perspective on, what really is something worth worrying about. I came back from an expedition in Chile, in the Atacama Desert in November. Went for a run with a couple of my friends, and I was like, it really puts in perspective every time I do one of these trips, just the nonsense that we worry about day to day. I don't know, my coffee wasn't hot enough, I had to wait in line at the store, whatever it is. The stuff that we worry about and get upset about is just often, in many cases, ridiculous. Go and do something like this and come together for a couple of days and do something really hard and really challenging, something that isn't comfortable, and grow. And I think that will, as individuals, we all can benefit from this.
Can you explain a little bit about the logistics behind Run to Montreal?
Logistically, what you need is at least an RV to sort of follow along with your runners, probably a bike for bike support. While I'm running, you might be driving. We'll have a navigator. We'll have one or two people sleeping. We have the next person ready on deck, a couple of people eating and getting ready for their next leg, and so on. And you just keep going until you get there. You just pass through the Baton until you get to Montreal.
How many runners per team?
We've done it with 7 to 8. Don't advise it. Most teams do 10 to 12. 11 to 13 is sort of a good sweet spot. Or if you're going to do it with 8 or 9 people, get at least 2 dedicated drivers, so that your teammates aren't driving. Yeah, they're just focusing on running. And the legs don't have to be broken up evenly. There is a very detailed map and booklet with each leg broken down, directions, and the GPS coordinates are provided so that you can go and look at them, and look up your leg so that you can see where you're going. But there'll be many times where maybe you'll do 3 or 4K at a time, just to sort of break things up. Doing 8 to 12K legs over and over and over can be tiring. So even though you get a bit longer rest that way, but it's really up to your own personal team strategy to decide how you want to do it. The only couple of rules are you have to follow the map as it is, and legs 1 and 67, the very first and last leg, only one person can run them. So the same person starts and finishes.
What do you recommend for a team to prepare for such a distance?
Most teams looking to complete it for the first time and have a good time doing it are probably people who are training for half marathon and marathons. Most people are probably experienced runners looking for something different. I recommend throughout your training cycle many days of double or triple runs. They don't have to be super long runs. They can be 3 5Ks. As an example, maybe you're doing a Tuesday morning run before work, and then you go and do your Tuesday evening workout with your group. Lots of those types of things. Getting out and doing some night runs when you don't feel like it, and organizing a couple of events with your team just to sort of practice doing that. So it could be a fun overnight event where you meet at 9 o'clock and do 3 8K legs together with a half-hour break. We also organize one or two of those with the event to bring all the teams together and just to give everyone a sort of an idea of what that's like, and have some fun and get to meet the other teams out there.
What about nutrition and hydration on the course? What do you recommend for that?
Well, luckily with Run to Montreal, there are many places to stop and pick up supplies along the way. I recommend you start off fully stocked with all the types of things that you'll need. We provide hydration, energy bars, and protein, and we'll provide coffee. That's very important. Make sure you know where the coffee stops are. But in terms of everything else, just keeping hydrated and keeping easily consumable snacks.
It sounds like a really exciting route and a really good challenge for any runner that wants to do something different.
It is. I've done it 7 times every year. And I mean, I doubt I'll get to run every leg, which is really cool. Every year is different. It's awesome.
Do you have a funny story that you can share about Run to Montreal?
It's funny. If you didn't ask me this question, I would have 30 stories. But this one in particular stands out. Apparently, another team showed up behind a school or a church, or I'm not sure what. And they showed up, they parked there waiting for the runner, and I guess they had to use the washroom. And, Run to Montreal, it's all about shitting in the woods. If there's no Tim Hortons, we actually wrote a song the first year on the way back about that, called Shitting in the Woods. Anyway, this team shows up. All they saw behind, whatever it was, the school or the church, was just drops of of toilet paper everywhere from all the other teams that had been through. Now, I don't recommend people doing that, but it was definitely one of the funnier stories that I heard.
Well, this is the thing, right? Because I'm sure that in parts of this course, it's in the middle of nowhere. What would you recommend to a team in that regard?
Become comfortable using the outdoors. Lots of wet wipes, honestly. I heard a team last year managed to not do any of that. They managed to only use public washrooms along the way. There are certainly enough of them. I can't imagine how they were able to time it that way, but who am I to argue? I will say you definitely do not want to use the RV washroom.
I was just about to ask that.
That one, you take that toilet down and just we make it a rule. I have an RV company that I often use, and we just make it a rule with the company that no team's allowed to use it for a variety of reasons. But one being, you want to make sure that you're going to smell at the end of 2 or 3 days of running as it is. You don't need anything else in the RV creating additional discomfort.
With each year, does it present a new challenge for you?
It's funny that you asked that. I never thought any year would be more difficult than the first year. Then year number 2 was almost as, if not as challenging as the first year, just in terms of organization and making sure you're getting people to do it. Each year, I would say that we've had some different challenges. There's always more and more teams interested in doing it, but the year leading into coming out of the pandemic was one of the most challenging, because we weren't even sure we could do it yet with lockdowns all over the place. We just didn't know what was going to happen. And the year before, I'd sort of shut it down weeks before. We had 4 teams. We were going to go and just do it ourselves and not really create a lot of publicity or hoopla about it, but I just decided, for the sake of the race and the health of the race, that wasn't going to be a good idea. So I delayed it a year, and we did 2 virtual events. But the year coming out of it, 2 years ago, it was nuts, because some of the sponsors that I had an amazing footwear sponsor. Well, the players had changed over the pandemic, and all of a sudden it was much harder to get stock. stock levels, and shipping was a problem. So getting product that I had promised for people was going to be an issue. So I had, I think, 9 weeks to restart the whole process from the time I announced the date of the 5th year. And this was going to be a make or break year. Like, I knew we'd have some excitement coming out of this. People were looking for something crazy to do. And at that time that we did it, no other fall race really existed around. They hadn't come back yet. So I wanted to sort of cement my time in a better spot. We used to do it in November, and November temperatures can be pretty harsh. The first year we finished in -18. So I had to get a whole new footwear sponsor, 9 weeks to go, and they had to come up with product and hoodies and all this stuff. This all happened in 2 months, whereas I would normally have 8 months or 9 months to sort of get this done. And so that sort of happened. Last year, the race grew a fair bit, so there was additional logistics with that, and we lost our hotel partner last year. I think with the reopening of the world, some sort of convention booked up everything. And so in August, the race was in October. In August, I had to go and find a new hotel and parking and all of this sort of stuff in Montreal. And as you can imagine, as the race gets bigger, it's harder and harder to sort of secure these types of things. So
I think it's pretty incredible that you were able to still do the race during the pandemic, because as you said, there were a lot of runs that just had to suspend all of their events, and you were able to continue with that. I think that's pretty incredible.
Well, I think looking at the guidelines during that time, there was nothing preventing you at that time from getting together and doing something like what we did. You just couldn't have massive groups of people all together, but we were never a massive group all together. Small groups of 10 people. And maybe if you're lucky to see another team or two and there's 1 or 2 runners out on the road at the same time, that's about it. You asked about funny stories. The reactions on people's face when you explain to them what you're doing is always the best. But even during that sort of coming out of pandemic year, nobody really batted an eyelash. In Quebec, it had just started where you had to have vaccine passports. So we had to make sure everyone got this taken care of. It just everything came together in that year. So, and all of our partners, luckily I have a good relationship. I've been in the business for a very long time. So there was a level of trust there, and we were just able to work together and sort of get this done, and people were itching to have some fun.
How much is it to register a team?
It's $1,000 a team. Each runner will get running shoes and a hoodie at the very least, sometimes a t-shirt in addition. And then each team will get a nutrition package, usually including coffee, a case of beer to celebrate afterwards. And then there's always a variety of other goodies that each team gets that I work on each year, plus discounts with hotel and RV sponsors and things like that as well.
And it's 1,000 Canadian dollars.
1,000 Canadian per team, correct. So about $100 a person, roughly.
So any fundraising for charities is over and above that money that they register for the event itself.
Correct. And any fundraising is gone through each team individually.
So if there's anyone philanthropic listening, and if they want to donate to either the run or the charity, where do they go?
runtomontreal.com is the website, and if they want to make donations there. If somebody wants to make a donation to the race itself, what we would use that for, we've had previous donations in the past, what we would use that for would be things like the party at the end, depending on the amount of money, or to get extra gear for the runners or extra nutrition for the runners. It would all go towards those types of things. www.runtomtl.com.
What does resilience mean for you?
Resilience, it's how much you can take, how much you can keep, how much you can get knocked around and keep going. Not being unfazed by outside factors when you're trying to, put together, let's say in this case, Run to Montreal. I was very resilient. I had a vision. I was going to push through, and I was going to do it by myself if I had to, but it was going to happen. People laughed, people snickered, people made fun, people said you couldn't do it, all that kind of stuff. Those things just generally roll off my back. Every now and again, you get something that maybe is hurtful, but you can't let it phase you. You've got to stand strong. And I think the people with clear goals and who put the work in and are motivated and determined will be more resilient. That's sort of how I sort of see things. And as a long distance runner, the better your training, the better your base, the stronger your foundation, and in life, your support groups, the stronger your support system, the more resilient you'll be. I don't believe in luck. I believe in making your own fortune. If you do all those types of things every day, just do a little bit of extra work every day and be consistent, it's going to be hard to keep someone like that down.
Do you have a practice of resilience that you can share with us?
For me, when I'm training, the only way with 3 jobs and managing a business to get everything in, and now a fiance, is, I run commute. That's it. Every 4 or 5K that I run adds up, or it's 3K to the gym, or 7K to work and 7K back home, or running to practice. That's just sort of how I get around. And there's no excuse. Running and training is a part of every day for me. That's just my lifestyle. That's who I am. So I would say to people, if you think you don't have time, sit back and think, well, where could I save time? A, and B, what can I do to maximize the time that I have?
What are the wellness benefits that you find with your resilience practice?
Well, you feel powerful. You're not reliant on the TTC or reliant on outside factors as much. I'm reliant on me.
And the TTC is the local transit in Toronto. Thank you so much, Darren. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Fabio, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Stumbling Spirit, Contemplations on the Path of Resilience. This is Fabio da Silva Fernandez. Join me again next week for another episode of transformative stories and beneficial practices to guide you on your wellness journey. If you wish, you can follow and DM me on Instagram at The Stumbling Spirit. Until next time, take a deep breath and another step forward on your path of resilience.